in the shadowy halls of Abbott's Cleeve Manor. A brilliant scientist lies, dead poisoned, then shot, his revolutionary atomic formula stolen. Hercule Poirot, with his razor-sharp mind, steps into a web of deceit. A grieving daughter hides a burned letter. Her fiancé's alibi crumbles. A secretive secretary guards his debts, and a sharp-tongued cook harbors a dark past. As cyanide lingers in a shattered coffee cup and a revolver surfaces in the garden, Poirot unravels a maze of greed, jealousy, and betrayal. Who wielded the poison and the gun? The truth brews in the black coffee. Will you uncover it? Chapter 1. The Silent Study. The October wind howled through the ancient oaks surrounding Abbott's Cleeve, the secluded manor of Sir Claud Amory, casting long shadows across the frost-kissed lawns. Within the house, a heavy silence clung to the oak-paneled study, broken only by the faint scratch of a pen as Sir Claud, a gaunt man with piercing gray eyes, bent over his desk. His papers, strewn with cryptic equations, glowed faintly under the green-shaded lamp. At 60, Sir Claud was a physicist, of rare genius, his mind a labyrinth of scientific secrets, the latest of which a formula for an atomic explosive of catastrophic power lay locked in a small iron safe beneath a portrait of his late wife. The clock on the mantel struck 11, its chimes echoing like a warning. Sir Claud paused, his hand trembling slightly as he sipped a cup of black coffee, its bitter aroma mingling with the room's musty air. He glanced at the door, bolted from within, as if expecting an unseen intruder. His latest letter, penned to a certain Hercule Poirot, had been dispatched that morning. Its contents urgent, yet vague, a plea for the detective's presence, hinting at betrayal within his own household. Sir Claude's eyes flickered to the safe, then back to his work, unaware that his next breath would be his last. By dawn, the manor was a scene of controlled chaos. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his patent leather shoes and neatly pressed suit, stepped from a taxi, his mustache quivering with curiosity. Beside him, Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, adjusted his hat against the morning chill. The front door swung open to reveal Inspector Japp, his face grim. "You're late, Poirot," Japp said, ushering them into the hall. "Sir, Claude's been murdered, shot through the head, and his precious formula's gone." The study was a tableau of tragedy. Sir Claude lay slumped across his desk, a single bullet wound at his temple, his lifeless hand resting near a shattered coffee cup. The dark liquid had stained his papers, pooling like ink. The safe, its lock expertly picked, stood open and empty. Poirot's sharp eyes took in every detail, the faint scent of bitter almonds in the air, the undisturbed bolt on the door, the window latched tight against the night. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "a crime of precision, yet the heart of it is chaos." Lucia Amory, Sir Claude's daughter, stood in the doorway, her delicate features pale with grief. Her dark eyes, red-rimmed, darted to her fiancé, Richard Amory, who lingered near the fireplace, his jaw tight. Richard, a handsome man in his 30s, with a restless air, met Poirot's gaze briefly before looking away. "I was in London last night," he said, unprompted, his voice strained. "I had nothing to do with this." Lucia clutched his arm, her voice trembling. "He's innocent, Monsieur Poirot. He loved my father." Poirot inclined his head, his expression unreadable. "Mademoiselle, in matters of murder, love is often the shadow of hate." He turned to Japp. "The coffee, Inspector, have it analyzed. And the safe, it was not forced. Nan, a skilled hand, perhaps." Japp nodded, scribbling in his notebook. The household gathered in the drawing room, a tense assembly of suspects. Edward Rayner, Sir Claude's secretary, stood rigidly, his spectacles glinting as he avoided Poirot's gaze. Mrs. Treadwell, the cook, a wiry woman with sharp features, hovered near the door, her apron twisted in her hands. Barbara, a distant cousin with a penchant for bright lipstick and sharper wit, lounged on a sofa, her eyes gleaming with curiosity. The maids, Elsie and Mary whispered nervously, while Tom, the gardener, lingered at the edge, his cap clutched tightly. Poirot paced slowly, his small, precise steps echoing in the hushed room. Sir Claude feared for his formula, he said, his voice soft yet commanding. He wrote to me, suggesting a traitor among you. Now he is dead, and his secret stolen. I, Hercule Poirot, will find the truth. But first, tell me, where were you all last night? His green eyes swept the room, and the air grew heavier, as if the manor itself held its breath. Chapter 2. The Web of Doubt. The morning mist clung stubbornly to the gardens of Abbott's Cleeve, wrapping the manor in a shroud of gray that seemed to mirror the unease within its walls. Hercule Poirot stood in Sir Claud Amory's study, his small, polished shoes planted firmly on the Persian rug, his hands clasped behind his back. The room, though grand with its oak paneling and heavy velvet curtains, felt oppressive, as if the very air held secrets it dared not whisper. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful shadow, hovered near the desk, his brow furrowed as he surveyed the scene of the crime. Inspector Japp, clipboard in hand, barked orders to a constable who was dusting the safe for fingerprints. The shattered coffee cup, its dark stains spreading across Sir Claude's papers, drew Poirot's gaze like a magnet. "Mon ami," Poirot said, turning to Hastings, "observe the precision of this chaos. A bullet to the temple, a safe opened without force, a cup broken yet the room is otherwise untouched. It is a puzzle, Nan, a puzzle of the human heart." His green eyes gleamed, and his mustache twitched with the faintest hint of anticipation. Hastings, adjusting his tie, frowned. "It's a grim business, Poirot. Sir Claude was a genius, they say. Who'd want to kill him? And that formulatomic something aura sounds like the sort of thing spies would kill for." Poirot nodded, his head tilted as he studied the desk. "Precisement. The formula is the key, but the motive that lies in the shadows of this household, we must illuminate them." He knelt, his gloved fingers hovering over the coffee stain, catching the faint, acrid scent of bitter almonds. "Cyanide, perhaps," he murmured, though the bullet was the true assassin. "Why two methods, I wonder?" Inspector Japp approached, his heavy footsteps breaking the silence. "We've got a suspect, Poirot," he said, his voice gruff. "Richard Amory, the fiancé and Sir Claude had a row 2 days ago. Something about Lucia's dowry. The old man wasn't keen on the match, thought Richard was after his money, and Richard's alibi is shaky at best. Says he was in London, but I've got men checking the trains." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A quarrel, you say? Most interesting, but suspicion is not proof, my dear Japp. We must dig deeper." He straightened, brushing an invisible speck from his sleeve, and turned to the door where Lucia Amory stood, her slender frame trembling in a black silk dress. Her dark hair framed a face pale as porcelain, her eyes wide with grief, yet burning with defiance. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low but steady, "Richard is innocent. He was in London last night, he told me so himself. He could never have harmed my father." Her hands twisted together, betraying her composure. Poirot inclined his head, his expression gentle yet probing. "Mademoiselle, the heart may believe, but the mind must question. You are certain of his movements?" Lucia hesitated, her gaze flickering to the floor. He telephoned me from London at 9. He was at the theater. He couldn't have been here. Yet the trains, they are," Swift Poirot said softly, almost to himself. He noted the faint flush on her cheeks, the way her fingers tightened. "We shall see. For now, I must speak with the others. The household, it is a tapestry of motives, non? The drawing room, with its high ceilings and faded tapestries, was a stage for tension when Poirot entered. The household had gathered, as he had requested, their faces a gallery of unease. Edward Rayner, Sir Claude's secretary, stood near the fireplace, his spectacles catching the light, as he adjusted his cuffs with a precision that bordered on obsession. He was a thin man, nearing 40, with a scholarly air and a faint smirk that suggested he knew more than he revealed. Mrs. Treadwell, the cook, lingered near the door, her sharp features set in a scowl, her apron crumpled as if she'd been wringing it. Barbara Amory, Sir Claude's distant cousin, reclined on a chaise longue, her bright red lips curved in a smile that seemed to mock the gravity of the moment. The maids, Elsie and Mary, stood together, their eyes darting nervously, while Tom, the gardener, leaned against the wall, his weathered hands clutching his cap. Poirot took his place at the center of the room, his small stature commanding attention. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice clear and deliberate. A great tragedy has befallen this house. Sir Claud Amory, a man of intellect, is dead, and his dangerous work is stolen. I, Hercule Poirot, have been called to find the truth. But truth, it is like a diamond, hidden in the rough. You will help me uncover it. Tell me, where were you last night, between 10 and midnight? A murmur rippled through the room. Edward Rayner spoke first, his voice smooth as polished wood. I was in my room, working on Sir Claude's correspondence. He'd been particular about his letters lately, especially those concerning his formula. I heard nothing unusual. Poirot's gaze lingered on him. Nothing, Monsieur Rayner. No footsteps, no voices. The study is not far from your quarters. Edward's smile tightened. The walls are thick. Monsieur Poirot, I was engrossed in my work. Mrs. Treadwell stepped forward, her eyes flashing. I was in the kitchen, as always. Dinner was cleared by 9, and I was preparing for breakfast. The maids can vouch for me. Her tone was defiant, but her hands trembled slightly, betraying a nervousness, Poirot noted. Elsie, the younger maid, spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Treadwell was in the kitchen. Mostly, I saw her go to the service passage around 10, but she was back soon after. Mrs. Treadwell's head snapped toward Elsie, her lips thinning. Mind your tongue, girl. I was fetching spices from the pantry. Nothing more. Poirot's mustache twitched. The pantry, Madame Treadwell. Most interesting. And you, Mademoiselle Barbara? Barbara's laugh was light, almost musical. Oh, I was in my room, reading a dreadfully dull novel. I heard nothing but the wind. This old house creaks like a ghost story. Her eyes danced with amusement, but Poirot sensed a calculation beneath her charm. Tom, the gardener, cleared his throat. I was in me cottage, sir, down by the gate. Didn't come near the house after dusk. Too cold for that. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing each response. He turned to Lucia, who stood apart, her hands clasped tightly. And you, mademoiselle? Your father was murdered mere hours ago. Where were you? Lucia's breath caught. I was in my room. I retired early. After dinner, I was tired. Her voice faltered, and she glanced at Richard, who stood silently, his face a mask of strain. Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. Yet, mademoiselle, the maid Elsie saw you in the corridor near the study at 11. You held a letter, did you not? Lucia's cheeks flushed, and a gasp escaped her. I couldn't sleep. I went to fetch a book from the library. The letter was nothing important. A note from a friend. She looked away, her fingers twisting a handkerchief. Richard stepped forward, his voice sharp. Leave her alone, Poirot. She's grieving. She had no reason to harm her father. Poirot raised a hand. Calm, Monsieur Amory. I seek only the truth. And your evening in London, it is not yet verified. A theater ticket, you say. We shall see. Jap, who had been listening intently, interjected. We found a train ticket in Richard's coat pocket. Poirot. London to Abbott's Cleeve. Last train at 10. He could have been here by midnight. Richard's face darkened. That's nonsense. I was in London until morning. I took the early train back. Check with the theater, they'll remember me. Poirot's gaze swept the room, noting the subtle shifts in posture, the fleeting glances. The truth, it is like a spider's web, he said softly. Delicate, yet it traps all who touch it. I shall return to the study. Inspector, the coffee cup, its analysis is urgent. As the household dispersed, Poirot and Hastings returned to the study. The room felt colder now, the weight of death lingering. Poirot knelt by the desk, his gloved fingers tracing the edge of the coffee stain. The cyanide, Hastings, he said. It was in the coffee, I am certain. Yet the bullet killed him. Why attempt two methods? A poisoner hesitates, a shooter does not. This is a contradiction, Nan. Hastings rubbed his chin. Maybe the killer wasn't sure the poison would work, or they panicked. Panic? Poirot's eyes gleamed. No, mon ami, this was planned. The safe, opened so expertly, suggests a mind of calculation. But the coffee, that is personal. We must learn who prepared it. Jap joined them, holding a small evidence bag containing the cup's fragments. Labs on it, Poirot. But I'm telling you, Richard's our man. Motive, opportunity, and a temper. To boot. Poirot shook his head. Do not be so swift, my friend. The heart of this crime lies not only in motive, but in method. The safe, tell me, was it opened with a key, or a tool? Jap frowned. No key. The lock was picked, clean as a whistle. Whoever did it knew their way around safes. Most curious, Poirot murmured. He moved to the safe, its door ajar, and examined the lock. A delicate touch, Hastings. Not the work of an amateur. We must ask who in this house has such a skill. Hastings glanced at the door. Could it be an outsider? A spy, perhaps. After the formula. Poirot's smile was faint. Possible, but unlikely. Sir Claude's letter spoke of betrayal within. The answer lies here, in the hearts of those who knew him. He paused, his gaze settling on the portrait of Sir Claude's late wife above the safe, and perhaps in what they coveted. The morning wore on, and Poirot requested interviews with each member of the household. Edward Rayner was first, his composure unshaken despite the scrutiny. Sir Claude was demanding, he admitted, polishing his spectacles. He suspected someone was leaking his work to competitors. He'd become paranoid, checking the safe nightly. And you, Monsieur Rayner, had access to his papers? Poirot asked. Edward nodded. Of course. I typed his notes, organized his files, but I never touched the safe. He trusted no one with that. Poirot's eyes narrowed. No one, not even you, his confidant, Edward's smirk returned. Not even me. Sir Claude was particular. Next came Mrs. Treadwell, her sharp eyes meeting Poirot's with defiance. I've served this family for 20 years, she said, her voice clipped. I had no quarrel with Sir Claude. My place is the kitchen, not his study. Yet, you were absent from the kitchen last night, Poirot said gently. The maid Elsie saw you in the service passage. Mrs. Treadwell's jaw tightened. I told you, I was fetching spices. The pantry's near the passage. Ask Elsie if she saw me in the study. She didn't. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. And the coffee, madame? Who prepared it for Sir Claude? I did, she said, her tone flat. He liked it black, no sugar. I left it on the tray outside his door at 10, as always. Outside. Poirot's eyebrow arched. Anyone could have tampered with it. Mrs. Treadwell's eyes flashed. If you're accusing me, say it plain. Poirot smiled, a disarming gesture. I accuse no one, madame. I merely seek the truth. As she left, Hastings leaned in. She's a tough one, Poirot. But poison, that's a woman's weapon, isn't it? Poirot chuckled. A stereotype, mon ami. The mind kills, not the gender. But her hands, they trembled, and her eyes, they hide something. The interviews continued, each revealing a thread in the web of doubt. Barbara admitted to financial dependence on Sir Claud, her carefree demeanor masking a sharp ambition. Elsie and Mary confirmed the household's routines, but offered little else, their fear palpable. Tom, the gardener, spoke of Sir Claud's recent tension, mentioning an argument he'd overheard between the scientist and Mrs. Treadwell about unpaid wages. She was proper angry, sir, Tom said. Said she deserved better after all her years. By midday, Poirot stood alone in the study, his mind a whirl of connections. The cyanide, the bullet, the safe, the letter, each a piece of the puzzle. He turned to Hastings, who was scribbling notes. We have motives, mon ami, but no clarity. Richard's quarrel, Edward's access, Mrs. Treadwell's absence, Barbara's ambition, all threads in the web. But the coffee, that is the key. We must know who touched it last. Japp returned, his face grim. No fingerprints on the safe, Poirot, clean as a whistle. And Richard's theater alibi, it's shaky. The usher doesn't recall him, and the taxi driver's description is vague. I'm betting he was here. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Patience, Japp. The truth will not be rushed. The coffee analysis, when will it come? Tomorrow morning, Japp said. But I'm telling you, it's Richard. Poirot shook his head. We shall see, my friend. For now, I must think. The gray cells, they must work. He gazed at the empty safe, his mind tracing the delicate strands of deceit that bound the household together. The web was tightening, and Poirot knew. The truth lay at its center, waiting to be uncovered. Chapter 3. The alibi's flaw. The afternoon sun pierced the heavy clouds over Abbott's Cleeve, casting a pale light through the tall windows of the manor's library, where Hercule Poirot had chosen to conduct his next inquiries. The room, lined with leather-bound volumes and smelling faintly of dust and polish, offered a quieter stage than the drawing-room, yet the air remained thick with unspoken tensions. Poirot sat at a mahogany table, his notebook open, his fountain pen poised like a conductor's baton. Captain Hastings stood by the window, gazing at the gardens, his face etched with concern. The murder of Sir Claud Amory, the theft of his atomic formula, and the shadow of suspicion over Richard Amory had set the household on edge, and Poirot's gray cells were already weaving patterns from the threads of doubt. Mon ami, Poirot said, glancing at Hastings. You are troubled, yes. You believe this Richard Amory. He is innocent, because the heart of Mademoiselle Lucia pleads for him. But the heart, it can blind us to the truth. Hastings turned, his hands clasped behind him. I don't know, Poirot. Richard seems a decent chap, but Japp's got a point. His alibi's flimsy. Still, to shoot one's own future father-in-law, it's beastly. Poirot's mustache twitched. Beastly, perhaps, but not impossible. The motive, it is not always love or money alone. Sometimes, it is fear or pride. We shall test this alibi, Hastings, and see where it cracks. Inspector Japp entered, his heavy tread announcing him before he spoke. Got something for you, Poirot, he said, holding a telegram. The London theater manager confirms Richard bought a ticket for last night's show, but no one recalls seeing him in the stalls. And that taxi driver says he dropped a man matching Richard's description at King's Cross at 9:30. Plenty of time to catch the 10 o'clock train back here. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Most interesting, Japp. The train, it arrives at Abbott's Cleeve by midnight. Yes, time enough for murder. But let us speak with Monsieur Richard. His story, it must hold water or it will sink him. Richard Amory was summoned, entering the library with a stride that betrayed both defiance and unease. He was tall, with dark hair and a jaw set like stone, though his eyes flickered with something akin to fear. He sat opposite Poirot, his hands gripping the arms of the chair. I've told you, I was in London, he said, his voice sharp. I saw the Merry Widow at the Lyceum, had a drink at a pub, and took a taxi to the station. I caught the early Train back this morning. Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing. Monsieur Amory, the theater. It is a fine alibi, but it lacks substance. No one saw you there. The taxi driver places you at King's Cross at 9:30. The train, it is swift. You could have been here by midnight, in time to visit Sir Claud's study. Richard's face reddened. That's absurd. I didn't come back until morning. Ask Lucia. She spoke to me by telephone at 9. Poirot's eyebrow arched. Indeed. And what did you discuss, monsieur? Richard hesitated, his fingers tightening. Just trivial things. The play, her day. She was tired, said she was going to bed early. Yet Poirot said softly, the maid, Elsie, saw Mademoiselle Lucia in the corridor near the study at 11, holding a letter. Curious, Nan. If she was tired, why was she not in her room? Richard's jaw tightened. I don't know. She didn't mention it. Maybe she couldn't sleep. She's been under strain. Her father was hard on her, always controlling. Poirot made a note, his pen moving with deliberate care. And your quarrel with Sir Claude, 2 days ago. It was about Mademoiselle Lucia's dowry, was it not? He did not approve of you. Richard's eyes flashed. He thought I was after his money. Ridiculous. I love Lucia. He was stubborn, wouldn't listen, but I didn't kill him. Poirot leaned back, his hands folded. We shall verify, monsieur. The truth, it is like a clock precise, but it must be wound correctly. You may go. As Richard left, his shoulders stiff, Hastings shook his head. He's hiding something, Poirot, but murder, I'm not sure. And Lucia, why was she wandering the halls? Poirot tapped his pen against his lips. The letter, Hastings. It is the key. We must learn its contents. Let us speak with Mademoiselle Lucia. Lucia entered the library, her movements graceful but guarded, her black dress accentuating her pallor. She sat, her hands folded in her lap, though her fingers betrayed her nerves, twisting a thin gold bracelet. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice low, I've told you all I know. I was in my room. I didn't see my father after dinner. Poirot's gaze was gentle, but unrelenting. Mademoiselle, the maid Elsie is certain she saw you at 11, near the study, with a letter in your hand. You told Monsieur Richard you were retiring early, yet you were not. Why? Lucia's breath caught, and her eyes darted to the window. I couldn't sleep. I went to the library for a book, as I said. The letter was nothing, a note from a friend, about a charity event. I threw it away. Poirot's voice was soft, almost coaxing. Yet Elsie says, you clutched it tightly, as if it were precious. What did it say, mademoiselle? Lucia's lips trembled. It was private. It had nothing to do with my father's death. Poirot leaned forward. Mademoiselle, a man is dead, his work stolen. Nothing is private in murder. If you wish to protect Monsieur Richard, you must tell me the truth. Her eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head. I've told you all I can. Please, leave me alone. As she rose and hurried from the room, Hastings sighed. She's protecting someone, Poirot. Richard, most likely. But why lie about the letter? Poirot's eyes narrowed. The letter, it is no mere note. It holds a secret, perhaps from Sir Claude himself. We must find it, tore what remains of it. Poirot and Hastings returned to the study, where the air still carried the faint temps of coffee and tragedy. Poirot moved to the fireplace, its embers long cold, and knelt to examine the ashes. With a small pair of tongs from his pocket, he sifted through the debris, his movements meticulous. Aha, he murmured, extracting a charred fragment of paper. The words were faint, but legible. Formula. Trust no one. Betrayal. Hastings peered over his shoulder. Good Lord, that's from Sir Claude, isn't it? He suspected someone was after his formula. Poirot nodded, slipping the fragment into an envelope. Oui, mon ami. He feared treachery, and he was right. This letter, I believe, was meant for Mademoiselle Lucia, a warning. But why did she burn it? To protect someone or to hide her own guilt? Jap, who had been overseeing the constables, joined them. "What's that you've got, Poirot?" "A clue, Jap," Poirot said, handing him the envelope. "A fragment of truth. I suspect Mademoiselle Lucia received this from her father, perhaps last night. It may explain her presence near the study." Jap frowned. "You think she's involved, or covering for Richard?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "I think, Jap, that the truth is like a mosaic, each piece small, but together, a picture emerges. We must question the maid Elsie further. Her observation, it is critical." Elsie was summoned, a nervous girl of 19 with wide eyes and a habit of twisting her apron. She stood before Poirot, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to cause trouble, sir. I only saw Miss Lucia in the corridor, near the study door. She looked upset, like she'd been crying. She had a letter in her hand, folded tight." Poirot's tone was gentle. "And the time, Mademoiselle Elsie? You are certain it was 11? Elsie nodded. "Yes, sir. The clock in the hall had just struck. I was fetching water for Mrs. Treadwell. She'd asked for it earlier." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Mrs. Treadwell, she was in the kitchen then?" Elsie hesitated. "Well, sir, she was. But she'd gone to the pantry for a bit, like she said. I didn't see her when I passed the service passage." Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings. "Most interesting. And did you see anyone else near the study?" Elsie shook her head. "No, sir. It was quiet, except for Miss Lucia. I went back to the kitchen after." As Elsie left, Poirot paced the library, his hands clasped behind him. "The corridor, Hastings. It is the artery of this crime. Lucia was there, with a letter she will not reveal. Mrs. Treadwell was absent from her post, and Richard's alibi, it crumbles like dry bread. We must reconstruct the night." Hastings rubbed his chin. "What about the others? Edward Rayner, or that cousin, Barbara? They've got motives to money, resentment." Poirot nodded. But the letter points to Lucia, and the coffee to Mrs. Treadwell. The safe, however, suggests another hand, a skilled one. We must learn who in this house knows the art of locks." Jap snorted. "You're making it complicated, Poirot. Richard's the one with the motive and the opportunity. I'm having the station master check the passenger lists." Poirot's smile was patient. "Do so, Jap. But the truth, it is not so simple. The coffee analysis, it will tell us more. And the letter, its ashes speak louder than words." As the afternoon faded, Poirot requested a timetable of the household's movements, to be prepared by evening. He stood by the library window, watching the shadows lengthen across the lawn. "The alibi's flaw, Hastings," he said softly. "It is not only Richard's. It is in the silence of this house, where no one speaks all they know. But I, Hercule Poirot, will make them speak." Chapter 4. Motives unveiled. The evening descended upon Abbott's Cleeve with a heavy stillness, the manor's tall windows reflecting the last glimmers of twilight. Inside, the drawing-room was ablaze with lamplight, its crystal chandelier casting fractured patterns across the faces of the gathered household. Hercule Poirot stood at the center, his small figure commanding the space as if he were a conductor before an orchestra of secrets. Captain Hastings sat near the fireplace, his notebook open, while Inspector Japp leaned against a bookcase, his eyes sharp with suspicion. The air was thick with anticipation. For Poirot had requested each member of the household to recount their movements on the night of Sir Claud Amory's murder, and the tension was palpable. "Madame et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant. "A crime has been committed. A man of genius is dead, and his work stolen. The truth lies among you, hidden in your words, your glances, your silences. I ask you now to speak of last night, From 10 until midnight. Be precise, for the smallest detail may unravel this mystery. A murmur rippled through the room, and eyes darted between faces. Lucia Amory, seated on a velvet sofa, clutched her handkerchief, her face pale but resolute. Richard Amory stood beside her, his posture rigid, his gaze fixed on Poirot, with a mix of defiance and unease. Edward Rayner, the secretary, adjusted his spectacles, his expression guarded. Mrs. Treadwell, the cook, stood near the door, her sharp features set in a scowl, her hands twisting her apron. Barbara Amory, the cousin, lounged in an armchair, her bright lipstick a stark contrast to the room's somber mood, her eyes gleaming with a curious amusement. The maids, Elsie and Mary, hovered together, while Tom, the gardener, lingered at the edge, his cap crumpled in his hands. Edward Rayner spoke first, his voice measured. As I said, Monsieur Poirot, I was in my room, working on Sir Claude's correspondence. He'd been particular about his letters, especially those concerning his formula. I heard nothing unusual, though I was awake until nearly midnight. Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. And your room, Monsieur Rayner, it is near the study, yes. You heard no footsteps, no voices, not even the shot that killed Sir Claude. Edward's fingers paused on his spectacles. The walls are thick, as I mentioned. I was focused on my work. If there was a shot, it didn't reach my ears. Poirot made a small note, his pen moving with deliberate care. Most curious. And you, Madame Treadwell? The cook stepped forward, her eyes flashing with defiance. I was in the kitchen, same as always. Dinner was cleared by 9, and I was setting out ingredients for breakfast. The maids were with me until 10, then I sent them to bed. I stayed on, alone. Poirot's mustache twitched. Alone, madame? Yet Mademoiselle Elsie mentioned you were absent for a time, near the service passage. You said you were fetching spices, I believe. Mrs. Treadwell's jaw tightened. That's right. The pantry's just off the passage. I was gone no more than 10 minutes. Elsie's a nervous girl, sees things that aren't there. Elsie, standing nearby, flushed but said nothing. Poirot's gaze lingered on Mrs. Treadwell, noting the faint tremble in her hands. And the coffee, madame? You prepared it for Sir Claude, left it outside his door at 10. Did you see anyone near the study? No one, Mrs. Treadwell said curtly. The tray was there when I left it. I didn't linger. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Very well. Mademoiselle Barbara, your turn. Barbara's laugh was light, almost incongruous. I was in my room, Monsieur Poirot, curled up with a terribly dull novel. I heard nothing but the wind rattling the windows. This house is like a Gothic tale, creaks and groans at every hour. Her smile was playful, but her eyes held a sharpness that Poirot did not miss. And you, Monsieur Tom? Poirot turned to the gardener, who shifted uncomfortably. I was in me cottage, sir, by the gate, Tom said, his voice rough. Didn't come near the house after dusk. Too cold, and I'd no business here. Poirot's gaze softened, but his questions were precise. Yet you knew Sir Claude well, did you not? You worked here many years. Did he seem troubled in recent days? Tom hesitated, his fingers tightening on his cap. He was tense, kept to his study more than usual. I heard him arguing with Mrs. Treadwell a few days back, out by the stables. Something about wages, she sounded right cross. Mrs. Treadwell's head snapped toward Tom, her eyes narrowing. Mind your own business, Tom. That was a private matter, settled quick enough. Poirot's eyebrow arched. A private matter. Madame, perhaps you will share it with me, for nothing is private in murder. Mrs. Treadwell's lips thinned, but she said nothing. Poirot turned to Lucia, whose hands were clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Mademoiselle, Lucia, you have told us you retired early, yet you were seen near the study at 11, with a letter. Will you now tell us the truth? Lucia's breath caught, and she glanced at Richard, who gave a slight shake of his head. I told you, I went for a book. The letter was unimportant. I threw it away. Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. Mademoiselle, I have found a fragment of that letter in the fireplace. It spoke of formula and betrayal. Was it from your father? Did he warn you of danger? Lucia's eyes widened, and a soft gasp escaped her. I don't know what you mean. I burned no such letter. Her voice trembled, and she looked away, her bracelet glinting as her hand shook. Richard stepped forward, his voice sharp. That's enough, Poirot. She's grieving. Stop badgering her. Poirot raised a hand. Calm, Monsieur Amory. I seek only clarity. Your alibi. It is not yet confirmed, and Mademoiselle Lucia's movements raise questions. We must know all. Jap, who had been listening intently, cleared his throat. I've got more, Poirot. The station master confirmed a man matching Richard's description, boarded the 10 o'clock train from King's Cross, and we found a revolver in the garden, hidden in a hedge same caliber as the bullet in Sir Claude's head. Richard's face paled. That's impossible. I wasn't here, I tell you. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The revolver Japanese fingerprints. Wiped clean, Jap said grimly, but it's a strong lead. Richard's looking guiltier by the minute. Poirot shook his head. Not so fast, my friend. The revolver, it is a clue, but not the whole story. The coffee, the safe, the letter, these are the threads we must follow. He turned to the household. I thank you for your candor. I ask now that you remain in the house tonight. Inspector Jap, I suggest you secure the coffee cup fragments for analysis at once. The poison, it may tell us more than the bullet. As the group dispersed, their footsteps echoing in the hall, Hastings leaned toward Poirot. This is a tangle, Poirot. Richard's in deep, but Lucia's hiding something. And that cook Mrs. Treadwell, she's got a temper. And what about Edward? He's too calm for my liking. Poirot smiled faintly. A tangle, but every knot can be undone. The coffee, Hastings, it is the heart of this. Who touched it after it left Mrs. Treadwell's hands? And the safe, its lock was picked with skill. We must learn who among them has such a talent. Jap lingered, his clipboard under his arm. I'm sending a man to London to check Richard's movements further, and I've asked the lab to rush the coffee analysis. But I'm telling you, Poirot, it's the fiancé. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Patience, Jap. The truth, it is like a fine wine, it requires time to reveal its flavor. For now, I wish to speak with Mademoiselle Elsie, alone. Her eyes, they see more than she says. Elsie was summoned, her apron now crumpled from nervous twisting. She stood before Poirot, her eyes wide with apprehension. I didn't mean to cause trouble, sir, she said softly. I only told you what I saw Miss Lucia in the corridor with the letter. Poirot's tone was soothing. You have done right, mademoiselle. Tell me, what was Miss Lucia's manner? Was she frightened? Angry? Elsie hesitated. She looked upset, sir, like she'd been crying. She didn't see me at first, but when she did, she hurried back to her room. In the service passage, Poirot pressed. You said Mrs. Treadwell was there earlier. Did you see her return to the kitchen? Elsie bit her lip. Not right away, sir. I was busy with the water jug. But she was back by 10:30, I think, stirring something on the stove. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging the timeline. And anyone else near the study? A shadow, a sound? Elsie shook her head. No, sir. It was quiet. Only Miss Lucia, and then nothing. As Elsie left, Poirot paced the drawing room, his hands clasped behind him. The web, Hastings, he said softly. It grows tighter. Lucia's letter, Mrs. Treadwell's absence, Richard's journey, the revolver in the garden, each a thread. But the motive, it is not yet clear. Greed, perhaps, for the formula's value, or something deeper, a wound of the heart. Hastings rubbed his chin. What about Barbara? She's got that sly look, like she's enjoying this. And Edward, he's too smooth, don't you think? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. All are suspects, mon ami, until the truth emerges. But I sense the answer lies in the study, in the moments before midnight. We must recreate the night, every step, every glance. As the household retired, Poirot requested a detailed map of the manor's corridors and passages, to be prepared by morning. He stood by the drawing-room window, watching the moon rise over the oaks. The motives, Hastings, he murmured, they are unveiled, but not yet understood. The coffee, the letter, the safe, they will speak, and I, Hercule Poirot, will listen. Chapter 5. The poisons traced. The morning light filtered through the heavy curtains of Abbott's Cleeve, casting a somber glow over the manor's ancient corridors. Hercule Poirot stood in the dining room, where a long mahogany table gleamed under the weight of a silver coffee urn in porcelain cups. The household had gathered for breakfast, their faces drawn, each avoiding the other's eyes, as if fearing what they might betray. Captain Hastings, seated near Poirot, stirred his tea absently, his mind clearly on the events of the previous night. Inspector Japp had departed early to confer with the forensic team, promising results on the coffee cup analysis by midday. The air was thick with unspoken questions, and Poirot, his mustache impeccably groomed, observed the scene with the keenness of a hawk. Mon ami, Poirot murmured to Hastings, observe the silence. It is not the silence of grief alone, but of secrets held too tightly. The truth, it waits to be coaxed from them. Hastings glanced at the table, where Lucia Amory sat pale and withdrawn, her untouched plate a testament to her distress. Richard Amory beside her cut his toast with unnecessary force, his jaw set. It's a grim lot, Poirot, Hastings whispered. Richard's still the prime suspect, but Lucia's hiding something, and that cook Mrs. Treadwell, she's got a look that could curdle milk. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Precisement, Hastings. The cook, she is most interesting. But first, we await the poison's trace. The coffee, it will speak where human tongues falter. As the household dispersed, Poirot requested a private word with Mrs. Treadwell in the kitchen, a cavernous room of scrubbed oak and gleaming copper pans. The cook stood at the counter, her hands deftly kneading dough, though her sharp eyes followed Poirot's every move. He noted the precision of her movements, the way she measured ingredients with almost scientific accuracy. Madame Treadwell, Poirot began, his voice soft but probing. You prepared Sir Claude's coffee last night, left it on the tray outside his study at 10. You are certain no one touched it after? Mrs. Treadwell's hands paused, flour dusting her knuckles. Certain as I can be, she said curtly. I set the tray down and went back to my work. If someone tampered with it, it wasn't my doing. Poirot tilted his head, his gaze fixed on her. And your knowledge of chemicals, madame? Your late husband, he was a pharmacist, was he not? A man skilled with substances, perhaps poisons? Her eyes flashed, and her lips thinned. What? Are you implying, Monsieur Poirot? My husband's been dead 10 years. I learned a bit about his trade, yes, but I'm a cook, not a chemist. I've no use for poisons. Poirot's smile was disarming. Of course, madame, yet the coffee, it carried a scent of bitter almond cyanide, perhaps. A curious coincidence, Nan. Mrs. Treadwell's hands resumed their kneading, though her movements were sharper now. Coincidence is all it is. I've served this house faithfully. You'd do better to look at that fiancé, skulking about with his flimsy alibi. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Mercy, madame, your cooperation, it is appreciated. But one thing more, your absence from the kitchen last night, near the service passage. It was not only for spices, I think. Her face hardened, but she said nothing, turning back to her dough with a vigor that suggested she wished to end the conversation. Poirot bowed slightly and left, his mind cataloguing her reactions. In the library, Japp awaited, a forensic report in hand. His face was grim as he handed it to Poirot. "Here's your poison, Poirot. Cyanide in the coffee cup, traces of it in the spilled liquid. But the bullet killed Sir Claud clean shot, instant death. The poison didn't have time to work." Poirot's eyes gleamed as he read the report. A double attempt. Japp, the killer, tried poison first, then resorted to the revolver when it failed. Why? Was it haste, or fear of failure? Hastings, standing nearby, frowned. "Two methods seems excessive, Poirot. Why not just shoot him and be done with it?" Poirot paced, his hands clasped behind him. "Because, mon ami, the poison was subtle, meant to be silent. The bullet, it was a desperate act, a change of plan. The killer, they were in the study, watching Sir Claud. When he did not collapse, they acted swiftly." Japp rubbed his chin. "That points to someone close, someone who could get into the study without raising alarm. Richard's still my bet. His alibi's falling apart. The theater usher's certain he wasn't there long." Poirot's gaze drifted to the window, where the gardens lay shrouded in mist. "Richard, yes, he is a possibility. But the safe, Japp, its lock was picked with skill. Does Monsieur Amory have such a talent?" Japp shrugged. "We're checking his background. But the revolver in the garden, it's got no prints. But it's the same caliber, and it was hidden near the path to the station." Poirot's eyebrow arched. "Convenient, Nan. A clue left to point at Richard. Perhaps we must consider all possibilities. Madame Treadwell, for instance, her knowledge of chemicals, is intriguing." Hastings looked skeptical. "A cook, Poirot. Why would she risk it? She's got no clear motive." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Motive, Hastings, is like a river, it flows beneath the surface. Madame Treadwell's husband, he died under mysterious circumstances, did he not? And Tom, the gardener, spoke of her anger over unpaid wages. A woman scorned, perhaps, or one driven by greed for the formula's value." Japp snorted. "You're reaching, Poirot. A cook with a grudge doesn't pick locks and steal atomic secrets." "Perhaps not," Poirot conceded, "but she has access, opportunity, and knowledge. We must not dismiss her, nor must we ignore Mademoiselle Lucia's letter, or Monsieur Rayner's calm, or Mademoiselle Barbara's amusement. Each hides something. To test his suspicions, Poirot requested Mrs. Treadwell prepare coffee for the household, to be served that afternoon. He watched her closely as she worked in the kitchen, her movements precise, almost mechanical. She measured the grounds with care, her eyes flickering toward Poirot, as if aware of his scrutiny. When the coffee was served in the drawing room, Richard hesitated, his hand hovering over the cup before pushing it away. Lucia sipped hers slowly, her eyes distant. Edward Rayner drank with indifference, while Barbara made a jest about the coffee's bitterness, her laugh cutting through the tension. Poirot, taking a small sip, noted the flavor rich, untainted. He had sent a sample to Japp's team for analysis, though he suspected it would be clean. The poison, it was not in every cup, he murmured to Hastings. Only Sir Claude's. The killer, they were precise, but not precise enough. As the household dispersed, Poirot lingered in the drawing room, his mind a whirl of connections. He summoned Edward Rayner for a private word, finding the secretary in the study, sorting Sir Claude's papers with a meticulous hand. "Monsieur Rayner," Poirot said, his tone conversational, "you were close to Sir Claude, his confidant in matters of work. Did he ever speak of enemies, of those who coveted his formula?" Edward's spectacles glinted as he looked up. "He was paranoid, Monsieur Poirot. He believed someone in the household was leaking information to foreign agents. He checked the safe nightly, changed the combination often. He trusted no one, not even me." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you, monsieur, did you resent this lack of trust?" Edward's smile was thin. "I was used to it. Sir Claude was difficult, but I needed this job. My finances, they've Been strained since the war? Poirot made a mental note, recalling Japp's inquiry into Edward's accounts. One last thing, monsieur. The safe its lock was picked with skill. Have you any knowledge of such things? Edward's expression remained impassive. None at all. I'm a secretary, not a thief. As Edward left, Poirot turned to Hastings. The safe, the coffee, the letter, these are the pillars of this crime. We must learn who had the skill, the opportunity, and the motive, and we must not forget the revolver, hidden so conveniently. Japp returned, his face flushed with news. Edward's finances are a mess, Poirot. He's been borrowing heavily, and there's a payment to a shady character in London, possibly a bookie. He's got motive, all right? Poirot nodded. Good work, Japp. But motive alone is not enough. The poison's trace, it points to a mind that plans, then panics. We must wait for the coffee analysis, and we must watch Madame Treadwell closely. Her hands, they betray her. As the day drew to a close, Poirot stood in the study, gazing at the empty safe. The fragment of Lucia's letter, the scent of cyanide, the expertly picked loqueach, was a piece of the puzzle. The truth, Hastings, he said softly, it is near. The poison, it was the first step, but the bullet was the last. We will find the hand that held both. Chapter 6. The letters clued. The afternoon at Abbots Cleeve Manor was cloaked in a grey drizzle, the kind that seeped into the bones and mirrored the gloom within the house. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, his small, precise figure framed by shelves of leather-bound books, their spines faded by time. The fire in the grate crackled softly, casting flickering shadows across his polished shoes. Captain Hastings paced near the window, his restlessness a stark contrast to Poirot's calm deliberation. The murder of Sir Claud Amory and the theft of his atomic formula hung over the household like a storm cloud, and the fragments of evidence, the cyanide-laced coffee, the expertly picked safe, the revolver in the garden were pieces of a puzzle Poirot was determined to solve. Mon ami, Poirot said, his voice low but resonant. The letter Mademoiselle Lucia burned it is the key to this mystery. Its words, formula, and betrayal suggest Sir Claude knew his danger. We must uncover what she hides, for it may lead us to the killer. Hastings stopped pacing, his brow furrowed. Lucia is protecting someone, Poirot Richard, most likely. But why burn the letter? And that cook, Mrs. Treadwell, she's too sharp for my liking. Could she have tampered with the coffee? Poirot's mustache twitched. All are possible, Hastings, but the letter points to Lucia, and the coffee to Mrs. Treadwell. Yet the safe, it speaks of another hand. We must tread carefully, for the truth is a delicate thread. Inspector Japp entered, his rain dampened coat leaving a faint trail of droplets on the floor. He held a small envelope, his expression a mix of triumph and frustration. The coffee sample from yesterday's test, Poirot, it's clean. No poison, no nothing. But I've got something else. Edward Rayner's financial records show a payment to a known safecracker in London, made last month. He's deeper in debt than we thought. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A safecracker, Japp. Most intriguing, Monsieur Rayner. He claims no skill with locks, yet his connections suggest otherwise. We must press him further. But first, Mademoiselle Lucia must reveal the letter's truth. Lucia was summoned, her steps hesitant as she entered the library. Her black dress accentuated her pallor, and her dark eyes, though still red-rimmed, held a spark of defiance. She sat, her hands clasped tightly, the gold bracelet on her wrist glinting in the firelight. Mademoiselle Poirot began, his tone gentle but firm. You have told us the letter you held last night was unimportant, yet you burned it. I have found a fragment in the fireplace, with words that speak of formula and betrayal. It was from your father, was it not? A warning, perhaps? Lucia's breath caught, and her fingers tightened on her bracelet. I don't. Know what you mean, Monsieur Poirot. I told you, it was a note from a friend. I burned it because it was private. Poirot leaned forward, his green eyes piercing. Mademoiselle, a man is dead, his work stolen. Privacy is a luxury we cannot afford. The fragment I found it was in your father's hand. Yes. He warned you of danger, of someone close who could not be trusted. Why do you conceal this? Lucia's lips trembled, and she glanced toward the door, as if expecting rescue. It wasn't like that, she whispered. The letter, it was from father. Yes, but it was personal. He wrote about Richard, said he wasn't trustworthy, that I should break the engagement. I burned it because it hurt me. It had nothing to do with his death. Poirot's eyebrow arched. Nothing, mademoiselle. Yet you were seen near the study at 11, clutching this letter, hours after you claimed to have retired. Did you go? To confront your father? No. Lucia's voice rose, sharp with panic. I went to the library for a book, as I said. I didn't see father. I swear it. Poirot studied her, noting the flush in her cheeks, the way her eyes darted away. Very well, mademoiselle, but the truth, it will not stay hidden. If you protect someone, it may cost you dearly. As Lucia left, her steps hurried. Hastings shook his head. She's lying, Poirot, or at least not telling the whole story. That letter was more than a warning about Richard. Oui, mon ami, Poirot said, tapping his pen against his notebook. The letter is a clue, but it is incomplete. We must know its full contents. Let us examine the fireplace again. Perhaps more fragments remain. They returned to the study, where the air still carried the faint bitterness of spilled coffee. Poirot knelt by the fireplace, his gloved hands sifting through the ashes with meticulous care. He extracted another fragment, smaller than the first, bearing the words trust, daughter. He held it to the light, his expression thoughtful. Sir Claude's hand again, he murmured. He wrote to Lucia, warning her of betrayal, but also of trust. Perhaps he entrusted her with something a secret, a safeguard. But why burn it? To protect Richard, or herself? Hastings frowned. If Sir Claude suspected betrayal, why not go to the police? Why write to Lucia? Poirot's smile was faint. Because Hastings, he was a man of science, not of action. He trusted his daughter, but he feared others. The formula, it was his life's work, and he knew its danger. We must learn who else knew of it. Jap, who had been listening, interjected. I've got men checking the village for gossip. There's talk Sir Claude was approached by foreign agents last month, offering a fortune for his work. He refused, but it made him jumpy. Poirot nodded. A fortune? Yes. The formula's value is immense, but so is its danger. Did someone in this house seek to profit, or was it vengeance, a wound of the heart? He turned to Jap. The revolver. Japanese trace of its owner? Jap shook his head. Nothing yet. It's a common model, no serial number. But it was hidden near the path Richard would have taken from the station. He's still my man. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Perhaps, Jap, but the revolver feels too convenient, like a breadcrumb left for us to follow. We must look beyond the obvious. To probe further, Poirot requested a private word with Edward Rayner, who arrived in the library with his usual composure, his spectacles polished to a gleam. He stood, hands clasped, as if awaiting a lecture. Monsieur Rayner, Poirot said, his tone conversational. You were Sir Claude's confidant, yet he suspected betrayal. Did he ever speak of specific fears? Of enemies within or without? Edward's smile was thin. He was paranoid, as I told you. He thought someone was spying on his work, possibly for foreign buyers. He mentioned a letter he received, offering a large sum for the formula. He burned it, but it shook him. Poirot's gaze sharpened. A letter, you say? And who knew of it? Edward shrugged. Only me, as far as I know. He didn't trust the others, not even Lucia, not fully. And you, monsieur? Poirot asked softly. Your debts, they are considerable. A payment to a safecracker, perhaps to learn a skill. The formula, it could erase such troubles. Edward's composure faltered, his fingers twitching. That's preposterous. The payment was for a personal matter alone, nothing more. I had no reason to harm Sir Claude. Poirot nodded, his expression neutral. Of course, monsieur. But the safe? It was opened with skill. If not you, then who? Edward's eyes flickered, but he said nothing, bowing slightly before leaving. Poirot turned to Hastings. He knows. More than he says. Mon ami. His calm, it is a mask. But is it the mask of a killer? Hastings rubbed his chin. What about Barbara? She's got that sly look, like she's playing a game. Could she have known about the formula? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Mademoiselle Barbara, she watches and waits. Her motive, perhaps, is money, but her heart is harder to read. We must observe her closely, to test the household's reactions. Poirot arranged for another gathering that evening, ostensibly to discuss the manor's security. He watched as they assembled, noting Barbara's amused glance at Richard, Lucia's nervous fidgeting, and Mrs. Treadwell's sharp stare. When coffee was served, Poirot observed Mrs. Treadwell's hands as she poured, her movements precise but her eyes wary. Richard, once again, pushed his cup away, a gesture that did not escape Poirot's notice. The coffee, Hastings, Poirot whispered, it is a mirror of their fears. Richard suspects poison. Lucia drinks reluctantly. Edward is indifferent, and Barbara jests. But Mrs. Treadwell, she watches them all. As the gathering ended, Poirot requested the manor's blueprints, focusing on the service passage near the study. He traced its path with his finger, noting its proximity to the kitchen and the back stairs. This passage, Hastings, he said, it is the silent witness. Mrs. Treadwell used it. Lucia was near it. The killer. They moved unseen, but not unheard. Jap, lingering nearby, added, I've got a man checking the village for anyone who might have seen a stranger last night. So far, nothing. This is an inside job, Poirot. Poirot nodded, his mind a whirl of connections. The letter, the coffee, the safe, the revolver, these are the notes of our symphony. Jap, the letter's clue, tells us Sir Claude feared betrayal. But from whom? We are close. Mon ami, very close. As night fell, Poirot stood by the library window, the rain tapping softly against the glass. The truth, Hastings, he murmured, it is like a shadow in this rain. It moves, it hides, but I, Hercule Poirot, will find it. Chapter 7. The cook's shadow. The rain had ceased at Abbott's Cleeve, leaving a damp chill that seemed to seep into the very walls of the manor. The late afternoon light, pale and watery, filtered through the tall windows of the morning room, where Hercule Poirot stood, his small figure as precise as ever, his eyes scanning the gathered household with a quiet intensity. Captain Hastings sat on a cushioned bench, his notebook open, though his pen lay idle, his thoughts clearly tangled in the web of the case. Inspector Japp, his coat still damp from an earlier foray into the village, leaned against the doorframe, his face set in a scowl of frustration. The murder of Sir Claud Amory, the theft of his atomic formula, and the mounting evidence against Richard Amory had tightened the noose of suspicion. Yet Poirot's gray cells were drawn elsewhere to the cook, Mrs. Treadwell, whose sharp eyes and sharper temper cast a shadow over the investigation. Mon ami. Poirot murmured to Hastings, the threads of this crime, they converge. The coffee with its poison, the letter with its warning, the safe with its silent theft all point to a mind both cunning and desperate. But it is Madame Treadwell who intrigues me. Her hands, they tremble, yet her heart is steel. Hastings glanced at the doorway, where Mrs. Treadwell had just passed with a tray of tea things. Her movements brisk, but her gaze wary. She's a tough one, Poirot, he said softly. But a cook, murdering her employer, It's hard to swallow. What's her motive? Poirot's mustache twitched. Motive, Hastings, is like a seed buried deep. It may be greed for the formula's value, or a wound long festered. We shall see. He turned to Jap. The village inquiries, Japanese whispers of Madame Treadwell's past. Jap nodded, pulling a crumpled note from his pocket. Got something from the local pub. Seems her late husband, the pharmacist, died under a cloud 10 years back. Official reports said heart failure, but there were rumors of poison cyanide, no less, never proven, and she left the village for a time after. Came back to work for Sir Claud 5 years ago. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Cyanide, you say? A most illuminating coincidence. And her manner, it is defensive. None. We must probe this shadow further. To test his suspicions, Poirot requested a private interview with Mrs. Treadwell in the kitchen, a domain of gleaming copper pots and the sharp scent of herbs. She stood at the stove, stirring a pot of soup with a wooden spoon, her posture rigid as Poirot entered. He noted the precision of her workspace, every knife aligned, every jar labeled a reflection of a mind that thrived on order. Madame Treadwell, Poirot began, his tone courteous, but probing. You have served this house with dedication, yet I sense a bitterness beneath your loyalty. Your husband's death, it was a tragedy, yes, and the rumor cyanide, they said. A painful memory, no doubt. Mrs. Treadwell's hand froze mid-stir, her knuckles whitening on the spoon. You've no right to drag up the past, Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice low and sharp. My husband died of a weak heart. The gossips in the village, they'd say anything to tarnish a widow's name. Poirot inclined his head, his gaze unwavering. Of course, madame, yet your knowledge of chemicals, learned from your husband, it is considerable. The coffee you prepared for Sir Claud carried cyanide, a poison you know well, and your absence from the kitchen last night, near the service, passage it places you close to the study. Her eyes flashed, and she set the spoon down with a clatter. I told you, I was in the pantry, fetching spices. As for the coffee, I left it on the tray outside his door. If someone poisoned it, it wasn't me. You'd do better to look at that Richard Amory. His temper's no secret. Poirot's smile was disarming. Monsieur Amory, he is under scrutiny. But the safe Madame's lock was picked with skill. Your husband, he was a man of many talents, perhaps. Did he teach you such things? Mrs. Treadwell's face hardened, but a flicker of unease crossed her eyes. My husband was a pharmacist, not a thief. I know nothing of locks. You're barking up the wrong tree, monsieur. Poirot nodded, his expression neutral. Mercy, madame, your candor, it is appreciated. But one thing more, your quarrel with Sir Claud, overheard by Tom the gardener. Wages, he said. You felt wronged, perhaps? She turned back to her pot, her movements sharp. Sir Claud was tight with money, that's true. I asked for a raise, after 20 years of service. He refused, said times were hard. It was nothing more than that. As Poirot left the kitchen, he exchanged a glance with Hastings, who had been listening from the doorway. She's hiding something, Poirot, Hastings said. That business about her husband it's too close to the cyanide for comfort. Oui, mon ami, Poirot replied, his voice soft. Her past, it casts a long shadow. The cyanide, the service passage, the quarrel, these are not coincidences, but we need proof, not shadows. Back in the library, Jap awaited with new information. The revolver, Poirot, he said, his tone grim. No prints, but we traced its purchase to a London shop, sold 6 months ago, to an unknown buyer. And Edward Rayner's been seen in that part of town, near the shop, around the same time. Poirot's eyebrow arched. Monsieur Rayner, he grows more interesting. His debts, his connection to a safecracker, and now a revolver. Yet the coffee Japet points elsewhere. Have you news of the village inquiries? Jap nodded, A barmaid at the Red Lion mentioned Mrs. Treadwell was seen arguing with a stranger last month, a man with a foreign accent. Could be nothing, but it fits with Sir Claude's fears of espionage. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Stranger, you say? Most curious. We must learn if Madame Treadwell had dealings beyond this house. Her access to the study, her knowledge, it makes her a formidable suspect. To test the household's reactions, Poirot staged another coffee service that evening. Asking Mrs. Treadwell to prepare it as she had for Sir Claude, he watched her closely in the drawing room, noting the faint smirk that crossed her lips as she poured for Richard, who once again pushed his cup away. Lucia sipped hers hesitantly, her eyes darting to Poirot. Edward Rayner drank without comment, while Barbara made a jest about the coffee's strength, her laughter brittle. Poirot, taking a small sip, detected no trace of poison, but the act itself was revealing. The coffee, Hastings, he whispered. It is a mirror of their fears. Richard suspects tampering. Lucia is wary. Edward is unmoved, and Barbara plays her part. But Madame Treadwell she watches too closely. After the service, Poirot requested a private word with Tom, the gardener, who shuffled into the library, his cap twisted in his hands. You mentioned Madame Treadwell's quarrel with Sir Claude, Monsieur Tom, Poirot said. Tell me more. Her tone, her words, what did you hear? Tom scratched his head. It was near the stables, sir, 3 days back. She was proper angry, saying she'd given her life to this house and deserved better. Sir Claude, he was calm, but firm, said he couldn't afford more, not with his work at stake. She stormed off, muttering something about making him pay. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Making him pay, you say? Most illuminating. And did you see her last night, near the house? Tom shook his head. No, sir. I was in me cottage, like I said. But I saw her in the garden, a week ago, talking to a man I didn't know. Looked like a city type, not from round here. Poirot made a note, his pen moving swiftly. Mercy, Monsieur Tom, your eyes, they see much. As Tom left, Hastings leaned in. Mrs. Treadwell's looking guiltier by the minute, Poirot. Cyanide, a shady past, a quarrel, and now a stranger. She's got to be involved. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Perhaps, Hastings, but the puzzle is not complete. The safe, the revolver, the letter, these point to others as well. We must confirm Madame Treadwell's movements, and we must learn of this stranger. Jap, who had been listening, added, I've got a man checking the village for more on this mystery. Man, and I'm pulling Edward's phone records might show who he's been talking to. Poirot nodded. Good, Jap. The web tightens, but we must be careful. The killer, they are clever, leaving clues to mislead us. The revolver in the garden, it is too convenient for Richard. The coffee, it is too personal for a stranger. We are close, Mies Amos. As night fell, Poirot stood in the study, gazing at the portrait of Sir Claude's late wife above the safe. The fragment of Lucia's letter, the trace of cyanide, the picked Laquiche, was a note in the symphony of the crime. The cook's shadow, Hastings, he murmured. It looms large, but it is not alone. The truth, it will emerge, and I, Hercule Poirot, will bring it to light. Chapter 8. The Final Revelation. The Evening at Abbott's Cleeve. Manor was cloaked in a stillness that felt like the calm before a storm. The drawing room, with its high ceilings and flickering lamplight, held the household in a tense tableau. There, faces etched with apprehension. Hercule Poirot stood at the center, his small, immaculate figure radiating authority, his green eyes sweeping over the assembled suspects. Lucia Amory, pale and clutching her handkerchief. Richard Emery, his jaw tight with defiance. Edward Rayner, his spectacles glinting with guarded composure. Barbara Amory, her bright lipstick a stark contrast to her calculating gaze. And Mrs. Treadwell, the cook, standing rigid near the door, her sharp features set in a scowl. Captain Hastings sat near the fireplace, his notebook open but forgotten. while Inspector Japp leaned against a bookcase, his arms crossed, waiting for Poirot's denouement. The murder of Sir Claud Amory and the theft of his atomic formula had woven a web of suspicion, and now Poirot was ready to unravel it. "Madame et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and deliberate, "a crime of great cunning has been committed in this house. Sir Claud Amory, a man of genius, is dead poisoned, then shot, and his formula, a secret of devastating power, is stolen. I, Hercule Poirot, have studied the threads of this mystery, the coffee laced with cyanide, the letter burned by Mademoiselle Lucia, the safe opened with skill, the revolver hidden in the garden. Tonight, I will reveal the truth." A murmur rippled through the room, and Lucia's hand tightened on her handkerchief. Richard stepped closer to her, his eyes narrowing. "Get on with it, Poirot," he said sharply. "I've had enough of your accusations." Poirot raised a hand, his expression calm but commanding. "Patience, Monsieur Amory. The truth, it is like a tapestry, each thread must be placed with care. Let us begin with the crime itself." He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind him. Sir Claude was found in his study, a bullet in his temple, a shattered coffee cup beside him. The safe, containing his formula, was opened without force, and the formula was gone. The coffee carried traces of cyanide, yet the bullet killed him instantly. Why 2 methods? The poison, it was the first plan, silent, subtle, meant to leave no trace. But when Sir Claude did not succumb quickly, the killer acted in haste, using the revolver. This suggests a mind both calculated and desperate. Japp nodded, his eyes fixed on Richard. "Sounds like someone who was here, in the study, watching him." Poirot's gaze swept the room. "Precisement, Japp. The killer was close, trusted, with access to the study. Let us consider the suspects. Monsieur Richard Amory, you quarreled with Sir Claude over Mademoiselle Lucia's dowry. Your alibi in London is weak. A theater ticket, a vague taxi driver, and a train that could have brought you here by midnight. The revolver, found in the garden near the path to the station, points to you." Richard's face reddened. "I told you I wasn't here. I was in London until morning." Lucia clutched his arm. "He's telling the truth, Monsieur Poirot. Please, you must believe him." Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. "Mademoiselle Lucia, you were seen near the study at 11, holding a letter from your father, warning of betrayal. You burned it, claiming it was personal, yet its fragments spoke of the formula. Were you protecting Monsieur Richard, or hiding your own secret?" Lucia's lips trembled, but she said nothing, her eyes darting to the floor. Poirot turned to Edward Rayner. "Monsieur Rayner, you were Sir Claude's confidant, yet he suspected espionage. Your debts are heavy, and a payment to a safecracker suggests you had the skill to open the safe. Did you seek the formula's wealth to escape your troubles?" Edward's spectacles glinted as he adjusted them. "That's absurd, Poirot. I needed this job. I had no reason to kill Sir Claude." Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Barbara. "Mademoiselle Barbara, you depend on Sir Claude's will, and your amusement at this tragedy is curious. Did you see a chance to profit from chaos?" Barbara's laugh was sharp. "Really, Monsieur Poirot, you think me a mastermind? I'm just a cousin with expensive tastes, nothing more." Poirot's smile was faint. And yet, the mind, it can hide behind a smile. He turned to Mrs. Treadwell, whose hands were clenched at her sides. "Madame Treadwell, you prepared the coffee, laced with cyanide, poison linked to your late husband's death, never proven. Your quarrel with Sir Claude over wages, your absence from the kitchen, your knowledge of chemicals, these cast a shadow. And the safe, opened so expertly, did your husband teach you such skills?" Mrs. Treadwell's eyes flashed. "You've no proof, monsieur. I served this house faithfully. I'd no reason to harm Sir Claude." Poirot's voice grew softer, almost hypnotic. "No reason, madame. Let us reconstruct the night. Sir Claud, fearing betrayal, wrote to me and to Mademoiselle Lucia, warning of danger. At 10, you left his coffee outside the study, but you lingered, perhaps, in the service passage. The cyanide, slow to act, failed, and in desperation, you entered the study, shot Sir Claud, and opened the safe to steal the formula. Why? Greed, madame, for its black market value, and jealousy of Mademoiselle Lucia's privileged life, while you, after years of service, were denied a pension. Mrs. Treadwell's face paled, her hands trembling. That's nonsense. I was in the kitchen, as I said. Poirot raised a finger. Yet the maid Elsie saw you absent, and Tom overheard your anger. Your past, madame, it speaks of cyanide, of a husband's death. And the formula, it was found this morning, hidden in a tin in your pantry, wrapped in a cloth from your kitchen. A gasp rippled through the room. Mrs. Treadwell's composure cracked, her eyes darting to the door. You're lying. You can't have found it? Japp stepped forward, holding a sealed evidence bag. We did, Mrs. Treadwell. In your pantry, just as Poirot said. Care to explain? Her shoulders slumped, and a bitter laugh escaped her. I should have known you'd meddle, Poirot. Yes, I took the formula. Sir Claud, he treated me like dirt. After all my years, I deserved more money, respect. I knew a man who'd pay for the formula, the coffee. I thought it'd be quick, quiet, but he didn't drink enough, so I used the gun. I didn't mean for it to go that far. Lucia sobbed, and Richard pulled her close. Edward's face was impassive, while Barbara's smile faded. Poirot's expression was somber. Madame, greed and envy are poor masters. You betrayed a man who trusted you, and for what? A fortune you will never see. Japp signaled to a constable, who led Mrs. Treadwell away, her head bowed. As the household dispersed, Poirot turned to Hastings. The black coffee, mon ami, it always tells the truth. Its bitterness revealed her heart. Hastings shook his head. Poor woman, driven to such lengths. But how did you know, Poirot? Poirot's eyes twinkled. The gray cells, Hastings. The coffee's scent, the safe's lock, her trembling hands, they spoke louder than her words. And the formula, hidden where only she would think to look. The truth, it is always there, waiting for Hercule Poirot. As the manor fell silent, Poirot stood by the window, gazing at the moonlit gardens. The case was solved, but the weight of human frailty lingered, a shadow as dark as the coffee itself.